So Berserk is kind of a dark, grisly tale. A lot of bad stuff happens. And let's be honest, that's an understatement. But among all the bad stuff that happens in Berserk, there's one character who takes the cake in terms of the most tragedy. His life, from birth to chapter 369, has been nothing but tragedy, misery, and heartbreak. Every time it seems like he has a moment of happiness, somewhere where he belongs in life, it's taken away from him. And not just taken away from him, but ripped out of his hands, spat in his face, and ripped his heart out. Of course, I'm talking about none other than the Giga Chad himself, Guts. And in this video, we're going to talk about the 10 most tragic things that happened to Guts in his life. Now, of course, as we go from 10 to 1, each event is going to get more tragic than the last. And of course, with only 10 events, some events will not be listed in this video because, let's be honest, Guts' whole life is just a big fucking tragedy, and it's impossible to list them all. So without further ado, guys, let's get into number 10. Number 10, Guts was born from a corpse. Now for most people, this would probably be the worst event of their life. Guts doesn't know his father, his mother, and he's considered a bad omen by society. When Gambino's mercenaries find him, they think he's a bad omen. They think he's some sort of devil child. Yet, Shizu, Gambino's lover, finds something interesting in the boy, something to be loved. So she grabs the boy, clutches onto him tightly, and takes care of him from that point forward. Unfortunately, she was not long for this world as well, because 3 years after finding Guts, she contracts the plague and dies right in front of his eyes. So imagine this, guys. You're born into this world, your mother was just hanged, you're lying in afterbirth, blood, and mud, and then the person who takes care of you, the person who finds you and gives you a home, dies 3 years later from the plague. That's a pretty tragic start, but it gets much worse from there. Number 9, Donovan. Now, of course, if you've been in the Berserk community for any length of time, you know who Donovan is. He's secretly the idea of evil.
Got him!
I mean, he's the guy that raped Guts. That's right, Gambino sold Guts to Donovan so Donovan could have his way with him. So at the age of 9, yes, 9 years old, Guts gets raped by Donovan, and it scars him emotionally from that point forward. If you remember the Golden Age arc, Guts had a huge problem with people touching him. That's because he was violated by Donovan. And because he couldn't let anyone get physically close to him, he shut himself off emotionally as well. He didn't have any friends, companions, or acquaintances. Everyone was an enemy. Everyone was a potential adversary to him. And so Guts took on a very tragic disposition, one in which he became a solitary warrior that fought against anything that confronted him. Number 8, the confrontation with Zod. Now, in terms of the chronology of Berserk, this is the first time that Guts met an apostle. The first time that he met a monster that put absolute fear into his heart. Guts always entered battle thinking he was gonna win, always thinking that he had the advantage, always thinking he could overwhelm his opponents with his sheer grit and strength. But with Zod, that was not the case. He realized that day that he was not the strongest. And with creatures like this lurking in the world, he might exist as just prey to a savage opponent. And not only did Guts confront the most terrifying monster of his life up to that point, he also was given a prophecy of doom. And I quote, "Death will pay you a visit, a death you can never escape." And goddamn if those are not some ominous words right there, guys. Number 7, the battle with the sea god. Now this one is tragic because Guts has on the Berserker armor when he's fighting the sea god. He fights all the eels inside, and yet despite this, the heart begins to beat so loudly that he loses his equilibrium and collapses to the ground. He's absolutely helpless in this position. None of his senses work. His hearing, his sight, everything is darkness and deafness. And he's just lying there, waiting for death. The only reason he got out of this situation was because of the help from the Marrow. But without their help, he would have died there right there and then. And even though Guts was able to slice the heart and get out of that situation, it took a lot just to get him out of the body of the whale too. And due to fighting the whale with the Berserker armor, he started to realize something as well. That his sight, his hearing were starting to fade. Everything that was prophesied by the Skull Knight was coming true, and it meant that he was one step closer to leaving the physical realm and becoming a mere ego, just like the Skull Knight, possibly forever trapped in a suit of armor. Number 6, first time using the Berserker armor. Now, this is actually kind of interesting because the Berserker armor itself provides Guts with a reduction in pain, with an ability that contorts his bones in such a way that he can continue fighting even though his body is going through extreme stress. By taking off these limits of pain and fear, Guts is able to exceed his raw physical power. He's able to go faster than ever before, and he's able to fight on the same level as apostles such as Grunbeld. However, this puts a great toll on his body. As we talked about with the Sea God, it takes away various senses the more he uses it. And it puts such a strain on his body that he usually has to rest for several days afterwards just to recover from it. In addition, every time he wears that Berserker armor, he gets closer and closer to losing himself, falling into the darkness and losing his very humanity, something that happened to the Skull Knight 1,000 years ago. Number 5, the Guardians of Desire. Now this happened in the Black Swordsman arc after Guts fought and defeated the Count. Now the Count used the Bailet to summon the 5 angels, Void, Slan, Conrad, Ubik, and Femto. Now of course, Guts knew who Femto was. He knew who the God Hand were. And when he tried to go after Femto, tried to go after the former leader of the Band of the Hawk and get his revenge for what he did to Casca, he was stopped in his tracks. He couldn't even lay a finger on him. Femto just merely pushed him back with some mysterious force. It's as if he was fighting a god, a being that he had no rights standing next to, a being that was so powerful that he was just a mere ant, that he was beneath their notice. And it made Guts feel like a speck of dust. It made him feel like nothing. And as the reader, it made you realize that his fight against these 5 members of the God Hand was useless. It was amounting to nothing. And it made Guts' plight seem so tragic and pointless in a lot of ways. Number 4, the confrontation with Slan. Now this happened in Klipoth. Guts was fighting various trolls, and Slan used the troll intestines to manifest herself in an overlapping region of the astral and physical realms. And like his encounter with Griffith, he could do nothing about it. Slan just slashed an astral wound across his chest. An astral wound that doesn't heal like a physical wound. It's a wound that took him out of commission for some time. And beyond this, he was also tested mentally as well. Slan posed the question, why not make a sacrifice like he did? And this was prior to him receiving the Berserker armor. It was a moment in which, as the reader, it felt like he might lose his humanity. It was a moment in which he might give in to all his needs and desires for power to maybe have some hope of attaining that revenge against Griffith. Number 3, the battle with Rosine. Now, this might surprise a lot of people, but I feel like the battle with Rosine is one of the moments in Berserk where he was giving into every urge to become a beast. He had been flipped inside out. He was a devil. He was a demon. Any shred of humanity that he had was being pushed down deep, deep within his soul. In fact, you could say that it was like a grain of sand in the desert. You could hardly see it. And in this battle with Rosine, Jill, who's absolutely horrified by what she's seeing, can't distinguish whether or not Guts is human or a monster. She trembles with fear and is astonished by his mere brutality and viciousness. Guts truly looks more dangerous than the apostles themselves. I mean, if the apostles are pure evil, Guts has got to be uber ultra evil at that point. I mean, it's just a terrifying sight. And I contend that it's one of Guts' lowest moments in the manga, if not the lowest. I mean, if the God Hand were watching this event themselves, they'd probably be shitting their pants thinking, man, we gotta step up our game here. Like, we think we're evil? Now that is freaking evil. And for that, it's a very tragic moment for Guts because it seems like he's abandoned all humanity at this point in the tale. Now, number 2 might surprise a lot of people, but maybe not. The Destruction of Elf Helm. Now, this happened in the most recent chapter of Berserk. And the reason that it's the second most tragic moment in Guts' life is as follows. Now, ever since the beginning of Berserk, Guts has always had Puck with him. Puck has been a mainstay since the Black Swordsman arc. He obviously didn't show up in the flashback to the Golden Age arc, well, except for a little bit, but then he's been there ever since. Lost Children's, Conviction, Falcon of the Millennium Empire, and finally Fantasia, and he's always been by Guts' side, always been that lighthearted character that sort of takes the edge off. And in the most recent chapters of Berserk, it looked like he was dissolving into light, like the rest of the elves in Donovan. Speaking of Donovan, she was made out to be like this purely benevolent being, like this being that maybe could rival the God Hand in terms of strength and magical ability. And yet, she dissolved into light just like that. Isma, who's just added to the crew, disappeared just like that. And of course, Guts, having Griffith within his grasp, right in front of his face, swung his sword through him numerous times, and it did nothing. All the work he's been doing the past years, killing numerous apostles, dark spirits, and things that go bump in the night, and yet, it's all for naught. He can't touch Griffith. He can't exact his revenge. And what's more, Griffith just grabs Casca right in front of his face and flies away on Zod. Everything that Guts has been working towards since the Eclipse is gone. He had to save Casca, and he did that. And yet, within mere days, she's ripped from his hands and possibly halfway across the world due to Griffith traveling on the world spiral tree. So not only is Casca gone, Guts can't touch Griffith. So what's the point of chasing Griffith at this point? Even if he catches up to him, even after months of traveling, he gets to Falconia and he takes down all the apostles, it's not like he can do anything to Griffith. At least, not from what we can see. So how can he exact his revenge? How can he save Casca? The whole story of Berserk hinges on the fact that Guts needs to somehow reconcile this anger, reconcile what happened in the past. And yet, when faced with a godly being that has supernatural powers that can easily defeat Ganishka, and Shiva for that matter, it doesn't seem like it's possible. It seems like it's an insurmountable challenge. Yes, Guts always contends. He always struggles and he always fights. He never gives up. Yet, Griffith simply might be in a different universe at this point. Or as Skull Knight said, he's the author of the story. It's impossible for a character to challenge him. And so, after saving Casca, getting her memories back, she's just ripped from his hands just like that. And now he's got to do it all over again? He's been at this for years and years and years. He's getting older. The Berserker armor is taking its toll. And it seems like he's facing a being that might be immortal. So it's very, very tragic. And number 1, this should come as no surprise to Berserk fans, is the Eclipse. I mean, what can you say about the Eclipse? Guts thought he found his new quote-unquote family, the Band of the Hawk. He found his lover. He found Griffith, who could challenge him and inspire him to be a better, stronger, freer man. And yet, he was betrayed by Griffith. He lost his lover. Not only that, he watched her get raped by the person he thought was his friend. He lost every single member of the Band of the Hawk that day. Judo, Pippin, Corcus, Gaston, Everyone was lost. Casca's memories were wiped away, so he no longer had that connection with her. Griffith was gone. He was now a demon. His whole world was turned upside down. And on top of that, he had to hack off his own arm to try to save Casca, and he had his right eye gouged out as he was watching her get raped. Without a doubt, it's the most tragic moment in all of Berserk. It was the catalyst for everything that happened after that, and it's probably the most tragic moment in any manga, period. Maybe besides some of the events in Goodnight Poon Poon, but I'll let you be the judge of that. So tell me what you think of this list, guys. What do you think is the most tragic moment in Guts' life? Subscribe if you haven't already, like the video, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.